The topic of criminal justice reform is very important to us because we know that upon release, individuals are faced with a multitude of barriers preventing them from living a productive life and obtaining economic mobility. I had the pleasure of meeting Doug and the Policy Forum team during a regional event and learned about the awesome policy work that they do in partnership with the business community and the nonprofit community to really help the individuals that we care about. Doug is the past chair of the West Michigan Policy Forum, co-chair of the board of directors for Amway, the world's largest direct selling company, globally recognized for his focus on entrepreneurship and providing opportunities for people around the world to build businesses of their own. I'd like to now turn it over to my co-host, Doug DeVos.
Kylee, thank you so much, and thank you for the partnership that you've demonstrated for a long time. And just before we started, Kylee and I were saying that it was just over a year ago when we met together in Kylie's office with Steve and Connie and kind of started, taking some of this work forward. And then the world changed, and so we've been probably one of the last times there's been some in-person meetings along those lines. But it is so great to work with the Ballmer Group and with Kylee and just to work on this topic. So let me talk a little bit about, first of all, I think we're going to go and thank our sponsors. The West Michigan Policy Forum has a lot of folks who have helped us. We are mostly volunteers, but we also have professional support to help us go forward. But it's the passion that really drives this effort. And so we were, kind of started from the Grand Rapids Regional Chamber. It was the advocacy group, and then we felt that we needed to take it a little more, a little bigger. We needed to have a little more energy, a little more passion to it. The volunteers who were part of it moved forward. We worked collaboratively with other business groups and policy groups across the state, and we have just found great opportunities as a West Michigan Policy Forum to interact with all people that are passionate for important issues in our state, to work together to find solutions as we go forward. Some of the things that we have worked on, in the past, if you look at some of the things that we've completed, was advocacy invites with regards to right to work. West Michigan Policy Forum was very involved with that in the early stages. A number of tax issues, elimination of the Michigan business tax, and again, I think in some of these things we're just trying to make sure that that we keep thinking through what's the best innovative, creative way to create an environment for all citizens in Michigan to move forward. So, transportation, early childhood funding, third grade reading, teacher evaluation, those are some of the things that we've been more active with. And you can see on our list, we still have a few things with regard to opening Michigan safely, some education options that we think of for children, and then, of course, criminal justice reform. And that's what we're here today to talk about. And this has been really important. As you see, it goes back to the 2016 conference and really advocating. There's so many other partners, as you see there, that are taking a lead in this, and we're going to have an opportunity to continue to build partnerships and relationships today. So you can see that this reform, it's about public safety, it's about redemption, it's about people coming back to becoming positive members and productive members of society. But I think the why is it's just the right thing to do. So many people have seen that there's injustice in what's happening in our criminal justice system, that it's the right thing to do, to find your way into it, to say we can be better. We can be better as a state. We can be better as a community. We can improve and move things forward by being more thoughtful in these areas. So we've been able to move forward some of the progress with safe and smart parole, clean slate that we've been able to do, and raising the age up to 18. But we still have more work to be done. We still, as you see there, earned time credits, cash bail reform, and the work is ongoing. But what we found is that people are engaged in this. People from all over the spectrum. When you make the case for engagement, they're there. And that's what we want to talk about today. And I want to just set up the introduction of Mark and Van a little bit first, because I think there's a couple things. One, the why for criminal justice reform. They lived. They have been part of this. Is their passion, and it's about working with anybody to do good and working together to do good. But I think it's also important to see what they're doing, as well as how they do it. They have different perspectives and come from maybe different angles, but they've worked together. They've built trust and they've built a relationship. And I think that's what we want to do on this topic. We want to build trust and a relationship so we can bring more people together. We can have more positive momentum to move forward with these reforms so that we can have a positive impact in our communities. So we're going to hear from them on a national perspective. We're going to have a panel discussion for those who are leading and doing this work here in Michigan. And we will have Q&A on both of those sections. So now I want to talk a little bit about Mark and about Van. So first, Mark Holden is the chair for Americans for Prosperity. He's been the general counsel with Koch Industries for many years. He recently retired, and he has been involved with criminal justice reform. And I've had the joy of working with Mark on this effort for a while now. And he's got personal experience. When he was in college in Worcester, Mass., he was a prison guard and kind of saw it, and that developed his passion. He was very involved in the First Step Act as well, that was passed in 2018, which was the first national step forward with criminal justice reform at the federal level. And then we have Van Jones. Van Jones is probably much more known to all of us as we see him regularly in his role with CNN as a commentator and an Emmy award-winning producer. And he has been, too, a leader in this space for more than a quarter century. He has developed many thriving social enterprises, the Reform Alliance, Ella Baker Center for Human Rights, Color of Change, and the Dream Corps. And Van, as well, with regards to the First Step Act, was very active. All his efforts towards leading efforts towards reform and moving things forward. So we are tremendously honored to have Mark and Van with us today. Van, I'm going to turn it over to you to start the discussion. So thanks for joining us, everyone. Van, all yours.
Well, thank you very much. And it's a real privilege to get a chance to talk to people who are trying to solve problems. We unfortunately now live in a society where you can just get so much attention for pointing out problems and trying to cancel the people who cause the problems, that sometimes we never get around to actually solving the problems. And so I love to be a part of groups and to talk with people who are serious about the solution side. Obviously, we need to be aware of the problems. We also need to be aware of the solutions. And one of the great things about the friendship that I have with Mark Holden and other people who are either libertarians or conservatives or come from a different political perspective, is that we have gotten a lot of people out of prison safely home, whose lives might have been otherwise ruined. And so my soul is rested. You catch a lot of flack in this world if you raise your hand and try to get something done. But because of the work that Mark Holden and I did together, working with people on the left and the right, people from Nancy Pelosi to Donald Trump, work with us on this. And the federal prison system, I believe, is 17% smaller than it was. I think 16,000 people. I didn't say 16. I didn't say one. I said 16,000 people came home earlier than they would have because of the First Step Act. And also last year in the middle of the pandemic, we were able to work with Republicans and Democrats across the country to get about 70,000 people home safely ahead of that COVID outbreak. Not enough, but a lot. So I've got 16,000 reasons to feel good about the work that we did. And not that many people can say that. It just turns out if you're a strong Democrat like myself, there just aren't enough liberal African-American heterosexual guys to solve all these problems by ourselves. They're just not. Math matters. In order to get these problems solved, I had to come to the understanding that about 80% of African-Americans are locked up in states that are either red states or at least purple states. In other words, where Republicans have an awful lot of power, control, and influence. And if I was going to be effective at getting people safely home, I was gonna have to learn how to work with a much more people. The crazy part about it is that I didn't know what kind of prison I was in, spiritually, politically, ideologically. I didn't know how much of a prison our elected officials are in. I didn't know how much of a prison our media is in. You don't get to a society with the biggest prison population peacetime in the history of the world ×2. And that's the US prison population. The biggest peacetime prison population in the history of the world ×2, without there being a whole lot of unfreedom going around. And part of what we have to fight for is the spiritual dimension of this. I went to Yale for law school. I taught at Princeton. I was a fellow at MIT. I've seen privileged kids make terrible mistakes, do every drug imaginable, be in fraternities that are worse than gangs in terms of how disrespectful they are toward women and law enforcement, and get second chances, privileged kids, third chances, 15th chances, and then be able to go on with their lives. I've been to country clubs and yacht clubs and other things where I've seen people doing drugs they should not be doing. Nobody ever called the police on a yacht club. I never saw the SWAT team kick in the door at a country club. I never saw the SWAT team kick in the door on an Ivy League campus. When people make mistakes, they get help. They go to rehab. They get support. We know how to help poor people's kids when they get in trouble, because look at what we do for rich folks' kids. So how do you get into a society where we have this much unfreedom for the visible folks behind bars? We're all in prison. We all are trapped in a system that doesn't make sense. My friends on the right will talk about the money that's wasted and the values of liberty that are being disrespected, and the values of redemption and second chances that are being disrespected. My friends on the left will talk about the ideas of social justice and racial justice and fairness that are being violated. But how did we get here? We got here because we thought that some people were beneath the protection of law and fairness and compassion and dignity and just being able to be human. And now we're all less dignified than we should be. We're all less human than we should be. All of our hearts are a little bit smaller than they should be, and we can fix it. I want to congratulate Michigan in particular for doing such an extraordinary job working with a red legislature and a blue governor and a blue lieutenant governor, and getting a big package of bills done, 20 bills, done. That's very hard to do, and especially during a pandemic. And I know a lot of people here worked on that, and a lot of lives have been changed. Lastly, before I turn it over to my good friend Mark Holden, I do want to give a shout out to the Dream Corps with the Cut 50 campaign, which is where I was working when I met Brother Holden. And then I also want to give a shout out to the Reform Alliance, which is an organization that's about 2 years old. I helped Jay-Z and a bunch of other people build that organization to focus on probation and parole, because we got 2 million people locked up and you got 4 million people caught up on probation and parole. So it's really 6 million people caught up in the system, which is just in a land of the free, makes no sense at all. And I have got many more things to say, but I know we have the Q&A, so I'll shut up. But what I will say is that if you had told me 10 years ago that me and Mark Holden would be closer than brothers, I'd have said no way, and he just said no way. But there are a lot of miracles happening in this work, and one of them is the fact that I can say that Mark Holden is one of my best friends, one of my closest brothers, and we're just getting started. So I'll give it over to my brother Mark Holden. I think you're muted, brother.
All right. Let's see. Well, thank you. Thanks, Doug, for your opening, and then Van, thank you for all you do. And yeah, when Van and I first met, it wasn't so great. We don't need to get into that anymore, but he's one of my best friends and an amazing person. And I don't know which is worse, because I've had to speak before Van spoke and now after Van spoke. Either way, most people don't remember what I say, so I can pretty much say anything I want. But in all seriousness, what Van was talking about, you know, what I've learned, I guess I'll say, from the criminal justice movement is that, you know, there's a lot more, like Van said, that brings us together than tears us apart. And if you look at our history in our country over the past, you know, you just name it, whether it's left, right, center, you know, the problem is we let politicians do this, and in the name of public safety. And whenever you hear a politician talking about, not all of them, but a lot of them, in the name of public safety, you know, it's probably not going to be a good outcome, quite frankly, particularly when it came to something like drugs. And I don't want to get into a whole big deal about the war on drugs, although we will talk about it because it is a big issue that, you know, it's 50 years now, and 50 years, drugs have won the war on drugs. And it's not going to change because we don't seem to want to do the things that need to be changed, but we can talk about that later. But, you know, from my perspective, I grew up in Worcester, Mass, as Doug said. You know, I got a job at the prison in Worcester. It was my first second chance. Let's put it that way. I was 17 years old, and I got in a fight, with cops, and some other things happened, and I was drunk, and it was kind of messy. And, you know, I grew up in a working class area, but, you know, we always talk about it's a two-tiered system. I benefited from a two-tiered system because we didn't have resources, so to speak, but we lived across the street from the sheriff of Worcester County. And so instead of going to prison or getting a record or having something that would have dogged me for life, particularly when we didn't have any resources, I went to work at a prison for 2 years while I was in college. And it was so eye-opening to me. And it was all these guys I grew up with that I played hoops against, or football, or classmates, or people I knew. And, you know, they didn't get a first chance or a second chance. They didn't know people, they didn't have money. And I saw them, you know, they'd come in and out and back and forth. And that was really eye-opening for me. And so from a long time, and that was, you know, when I was 18, 19, 20, I've always been engaged in thinking about these issues. And when I look back at what happened to me, I'm very lucky to be here today. And I have so much to give to others who didn't get second chances, or people who did get a second chance, or whatever else might have happened to them after that. And one of the great things has been working with Van and his team, and so many other people, so many other groups around the country, and coming back to Michigan, which is, in my opinion, one of the best places for criminal justice reform issues. I mean, you guys have really been the tip of the spear, and it's really great to be back here. It's been a really tough year. I think 2 years now we're going on, and I think that it always amazes me that this was an issue back when I was in Worcester, Mass, working in the county prison, that, you know, there was nothing going on there. And if you told Mark Holden in 1981, 1982, that this would be the issue that brings people together, left, right, poor, you name it, whatever it is, Yankees fans, Red Sox fans, Michigan fans, Ohio State fans, although Ohio is doing a terrible job on these issues, by the way. Michigan, you're kicking their butt and keep doing it. I've told them that in Ohio, but if you told me this would be the issue to bring people together, I would have said there's no way. But I'm really glad it is. And I think it's really, you know, something that we can build on and should try to build on in our country to get this is too much of an important issue that leads to so many other issues. And we have to stay together on these issues. And there's all these folks out there maybe trying to tear each other apart and everything else. But, you know, in our little, you know, criminal justice sphere here, we're getting things done, and there's so much more to do. So thank you for letting me be here today. And thanks always for Van being here. And I'm looking forward to having a good discussion.
Well, thank you, Van and Mark, both for joining us, for leaning in, for your expertise. We do, because you're both so gracious, we do now have time for question and answer. So anybody in the audience, if you want to ask a question, please enter that into the chat. I'll see that in the chat and pitch those. If you have a particular person you want to ask that question to, please note that, and I'll be sure to direct it. Otherwise, I'll just ping pong back and forth between you, if I might. Van, can you help? So we heard from, actually, Mark Holden visited the West Michigan Policy Forum in 2016 and talked about criminal justice reform. That kind of kicked off our involvement. So he told us a story then, and he kind of reiterated it a little bit today, what brought him to criminal justice reform. You've been doing this for 25 years now, but what started you in this endeavor?
Well, you know, I spent my 20s in a drug infested den of iniquity called Yale University. And so I saw first up, you know, I saw, you know, firsthand right up close how, you know, kids would do things that were illegal. And the system would code that activity as not illegal. If a kid at Yale was doing drugs, they were quote unquote experimenting with drugs. If a kid 5 blocks away in the housing projects were doing drugs, they were pushing and selling drugs. But it was the same literal activity with the same age group kids within eyesight of each other. And one was being coded with you're experimenting and maybe you should go to rehab. The other was being coded with you are pushing drugs, you go to prison. But a video camera from Mars couldn't tell the difference except for the skin color. Now, I'm a nerd. I've never had a beer. I've never had a sip of wine. I've never had any drugs at all. My father was a cop in the military, and I'm still scared he's going to get me. He's been dead 10 years. I'm still scared he's going to get me. So I've never done any of that stuff. And so I had a really, you know, kind of an objective view about what was going on. And I talked to my law professors and, you know, and I said, this is not liberty and justice for all. I don't understand why I'm reading one thing in this law library. And when I walk out the front door into the streets of New Haven, I can't see any evidence of what I'm reading about. And it bothered me. And then, you know, here we are with the this trial that's going on. And I went to law school from 1990 to 93. 92 was Rodney King. And so that was the first time you had a videotape police incident that people were shocked by. And the verdict in that case, you know, came out in a way that was shocking and disappointing to a lot of African Americans, including myself. And I just felt, well, here I am, 23 years old, 24 years old with a law degree. And I'm seeing my peers getting just mowed down by the criminal justice system, you know, or by each other, being crushed between street violence and police violence. And it didn't seem like we were moving in the right direction. And so I had nothing to lose. I was just a kid with a law degree. I you know, moved to the Bay Area to date a girl who dumped me 2 weeks later. So I was really angry. And so I just decided, you know, put my energy to some good use. And that's what happened.
Energy, yeah, than other options. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Mark, Van just kind of hinted or talked about second chances. The policy forum talks about opportunities for redemption. Why is that important?
Well, I mean, it's important for all of us. You know, this whole thing of second chances. Again, I've had many second chances, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago. I think that the problem is, particularly in our system, in our country, we've, you know, greatest country in the world and all this other stuff, but we've got a two-tiered system, and it's what Van was just talking about. And you know, who hasn't made a mistake? Who hasn't done something that, you know, some of the things I did, one, I did get caught. There were many others I didn't. And so I guess the whole idea is that there's nobody perfect, that we've got a country that, you know, it's a great country, but we've got a lot of issues that we're still dealing with that have been going on before the country even existed. So we're still working on that as well. And if you look at the criminal justice system, it is kind of these, it stands out there as a place, you know, there are people in there who have done things that they really, you know, need to pay and pay some time for. And there are others who made bad mistakes. And there are others who just, like we're talking about with the war on drugs, and, you know, it's 100-to-1 difference between powder cocaine and crack cocaine. And so that ended up filling up our jails and penitentiaries, because everybody was basically seen as you had a 30-year, 40-year term for that type of for having powder or cocaine, excuse me, crack cocaine. So these different laws that were put in place with the war on drugs, and if you go back to what the war on drugs was all about, well, I mean, John Ehrlichman gave up the ghost, a few years ago before he left this earth, where he said that it had nothing really to do with drugs. It was all about destabilizing communities of color, so they couldn't vote, and then also just basically using them and the elites for a way to win elections. And once we let elections and once we let politicians run these things on both sides, obviously, we've got a president now who loved what happened with the Clinton crime bill, and he's hopefully now, and I think President Biden's going to do the right thing. Hopefully, we'll get a lot of work done. But we all have been a part of this, and to the extent you look at our system in our country, we have the most people in prison in the history of any other place on earth, and I'm talking about democracies. And to the extent we don't give people second chances, but we just keep doing the same thing, having them come out and go back in, that's just not going to work anymore. I mean, we've got to change, and we know what can change, and it's based on what we've learned with data and evidence-based practices and all these other things, that people can get better, that that people change over time. The science shows that. But we haven't really gotten up to that part in the story until recently. So there's so much more that can happen. And most of it has to happen before anyone even touches the system. But that is a discussion for another day. But it is all about second chances for everybody in our country. And those that don't believe in it, I mean, hats off to you, because there aren't many people like that. But we all need to help each other and continue. Last thing I'll say is, given what's going on in Minnesota, what happened this past weekend in Minnesota, I really hope that things don't get out of hand again, because I live in DC and it was terrible last year. And I don't think we can go through this again, not just in DC, but as a country. So let's give ourselves all second chances and stick together on this. But it's very much important, and it's basically what we should be focused on, is trying to help people get better.
Thank you for that. Van, let me pick up on a piece that Mark just mentioned, and a couple of combining questions from Monique and Lois. Tell us about the strategy to build the broad coalition to achieve criminal justice reform in the past, and what do you see as opportunities going forward at the federal level?
Well, look, I mean, I'm going to say some stuff that may be surprising to people, but the most important thing is the human relationships between the two sides. We can talk. I can give you all the arguments on paper, and Holden can do a better job than I can in terms of going from the savings to the salvation, going from the money savings. So he does a great job with that, and I'll let him do it, because I think it's important people have the head arguments. But it's the heart that really prevails for us. I like Holden. He's a good dude. I've seen him turn to people on his own team and say, hey, I see it differently. Listen to us now. I've seen his integrity. I've seen his commitment. I don't have to ask myself late at night when I'm saying my prayers, hey, is Mark Holden a good guy? I like this guy. People get mad when I said I like Jared Kushner. Jared Kushner and I disagree on 99 issues, but Jared Kushner's father went to prison, and he understands this issue. And I've spent a lot of time working with Jay-Z. I'll tell you, with Jared Kushner, I got 99 problems, but prisons ain't one. And we were able to start there and develop true appreciation for each other. Doesn't mean that when it was time to vote, I didn't go out there and vote against him. And doesn't mean when Biden got in there, I wasn't happiest man alive. Y'all saw me crying on TV, so happy. But the two things can be true at the same time. You can disagree with somebody on politics, vote against them, 99% of the time, but that 1% of the time where it matters, you can put people first. So the first thing is those human relationships matter. And I'd rather see people start doing something small together and develop a big commitment to each other and then take on something big, than try and start off something huge and you don't even like each other. And the first time you hit a roadblock, everybody leaves the room. So number one, that. Number two, on this issue, politics has to be put to one side, partisan politics, because for the most part, you're talking about people who are not allowed to vote. They have no power at all. When you're in prison, you're not a Democrat, you're not a Republican, because you're not allowed to vote. You're not allowed to tweet. You're not allowed to march. You're not allowed to participate in the political process. So to hold any of those people hostage to partisan politics is completely immoral. As much time as I spent in the Obama White House begging those folks to let people out of prison and change the laws, if I hadn't been willing to work just as hard with a Republican president, then maybe it wasn't about those people behind bars. Maybe it was about me and my ego and my access and how I look to the public. And so that constituency, you have to put above partisan politics because they have no ability to affect the system. They're literally hostages. And you can argue about whether they should have the right to vote or not. The reality is they don't. And so once you put those people above partisan politics, and then once you really give yourself the opportunity to get to know people on the other side, then the miracles start to happen. Because a lot of times you realize, well, hold on a second. Some of the stuff we think we disagree on, we just put the emphasis on a different syllable. A lot of times we're just putting the emphasis on a different syllable. We don't disagree. We're just got different priorities in how we get to it. And that only comes out of really knowing people and knowing each other and being able to start to translate. You got enough panels with somebody, you're listening to their rap, they're listening to yours, and eventually you start harmonizing. But it is, and now I believe that the left-right coalition on criminal justice reform remains, despite all that we've been through and all the ups and downs and the issues, and we don't have to argue about them here, remains the most durable bipartisan coalition. We've won a bunch, I think 24, 25 bipartisan criminal justice bills, over the past couple of years in red states, blue states, and purple states, but we've also gotten to know each other, and there's no substitute for that.
Good points. Good points. Mark, you represented a major employer in this country. So certainly a key to success for a returning citizen is work. So what do employers need to do to make sure that the citizens who are returning their family and their community can find success?
Well, I think it's employers need to be open to it. And obviously that's their choice, right? I mean, it's not, you can't force these things. And when we started working on the second chance hiring and all these other issues, it was easy for me to go out there and talk about it because it's something that Charles Koch and David Koch believed in from the time that they started working at Koch Industries. And we had hired people with criminal records before, everyone asked, you guys ban the box? And I said, well, I don't know, but we've been hiring people for such a long time. And we did ban the box ultimately, but it was one of these things, again, with Charles and David, Charles in particular, although David was one of the original funders for Families Against Mandatory Minimums and other organizations. It was easy for me to go out there and talk about it because I had Charles and David behind me talking about it and hiring people, just putting their money where their mouth is, right? And so that doesn't mean that everybody's going to be okay with it. And there were people in our organizations and people in our groups that, one in particular said, well, you hire who you want, I'll hire who I want, and I don't want any criminals around. I said, well, okay, that's cool. No one wants criminals around, but do you know if they're really a criminal or what? Do you know who this person is? Get to know the person. So basically what I'd do is just say that, people would ask me, what should I do? How should I do it? I said, you should just hire someone who has a criminal record and then see how it goes. And then, if that goes well, hire another one. And so I've had some friends, in Wichita, when I lived there, who had they had a fitness center, and they asked me what they wanted to hire someone. So what should I do? Well, they ended up hiring 2 or 3 different people. They were the best people that they had in their whole organization. So I think it's just like anything else. You have to get to know people. You have to get to understand that. And, you know, you got to do your homework on it. And as I've always said, you know, people would say, well, geez, you know, they have criminal records, there's this or that. And I said, look, we've had people that, you know, went to the best schools, you know, in the country, schools like Van went to, not like schools I went to. And we've had people who went to all the great schools and they steal from us. They're just terrible human beings. And then we've had people who come out of prison and are just amazing. And it's just kind of the whole thing. It's one of my favorite sayings is, I don't know who said it. And if I don't ever find out who said it, I'll just take the credit for it. But it's this whole thing that man should never place a period where God intended a comma, because people can change. And that's something that, you know, for so long in our country, particularly when it came to people with a criminal record, regardless of what it was, it's like, oh my God, we can't, you know, this can't happen. They're dangerous or this or that. And that's just, I never had that feeling just because of when I worked in a prison and all these other things I've done. But at the same time, I never had that feeling. But then when people start to actually get to know people and what they've been through, and there's more and more, it really, I've seen these organizations and different groups now, and major corporations are hiring people. And it's really important that we keep doing that for a lot of reasons. We were so excited with the First Step Act. There's so much more to do. But right before the pandemic came, it was like, yeah, there's 7.2 million jobs every year that go unwanted because people aren't skilled up or they can't do this or that. And we were really excited that we could get these people out there and working, and then boom, the whole world fell apart. So now we've got folks who are, you know, coming out of prison, who are going to be trying to get jobs with people who don't have criminal records. And so it's even more important for those reasons. And it's not just hire someone just because to hire them, but really, in my opinion, it's up to the individual employers, excuse me, they should take a chance on people, because it gets back to what I said, and I keep saying it, and I don't want to be holier than thou because I'm not. Any one of us, at least I'll say it for myself, maybe not you all, but easily I could have been in a prison for some of the things I did or didn't do or didn't get caught for. And I think that we all need to understand that and just give some grace to people. But that, at the end of the day, we've found that they're a great source of work and they're really hungry. And some of the other folks we hire who come from those fancy schools, if they don't steal from us, they're just kind of, some of them are just jerks, man. You just don't want them around. No science there, though.
Van, a question from Fred, who I know hires returning citizens, asks, are there examples of policies in other states that you would recommend that we look to lower prison populations? I should say safely lower prison populations.
Well, you know, you've already passed some here recently, which, you know, should begin to have a big positive impact. What I would say is that you know, we should, all of us see ourselves as being in the homecoming business. When you have the biggest prison population peacetime in the history of the world, and you're trying to shrink that population, it's a little bit easier, as Holden was saying, when the economy is going up and crime is going down, you can got both parties coming together. Those are the conditions that prevailed during that, the First Step Back and everything that led up to that, all the stuff we did in Georgia, all the stuff that we did, even in Mississippi. When the economy is going down and crime is going up and the parties are pulling apart, it gets harder. And so, but even in this situation we're in right now, where it might be a little bit rougher sailing, the most important thing is that we should be in the homecoming business. We should pass every law that we can to make it easier for people to come home safely and successfully, which means a lot of these restrictions that come down on people, they leave a physical prison and now they're in a social prison where they can't get a whole bunch of jobs. They can't get a whole bunch of licenses. They can't rent an apartment. They can't get a student loan. They can't be a barber, because in the old days, barbers had knives. Now they got the zzz, and somehow you can't be a barber with the zzz. How are you gonna hurt somebody with a zzz? It doesn't make any sense. But you have all of these stupid things that become this impossible spider's web of catch-22s, that you insist that people come home and get jobs, and have a home and and do right by their kids and do all these things. And yet you make it almost impossible. There are always these great success stories, but they shouldn't be the exception. They shouldn't be exceptionalized. They're exceptional. They shouldn't be exceptionalized as proof that anybody else could do it. It should be much easier. So rather than having these trap doors into failure, there should be springboards to success. We should be doing once you come home, you should come home, and we should welcome you home. And there may be certain categories that you might want to look at slightly differently, but on the whole, it's tough enough just saying I'm a formerly incarcerated person. So I just think that for the next round, it may be tough right now, in some places where the economy and the crime rate may be conspiring against you to do some stuff on sentencing and other stuff, but take all the stupid out the system. You just need an anti-stupid coalition just to take all the stupid stuff that could only lead to failure. There's no way it could help anybody be successful. And I believe you can have even in the worst of times, I think you can have a big anti-stupid coalition to make sure that people can succeed when they get home.
Thank you. I think we're headed into overtime now, but if you guys will bear with me for one more question. Got a question from Mark, and not to typecast, but I'll pitch it back to Mark just by rotation. Can you share any programs that you've seen as particularly successful in preparing people to return to success when they return to their
This
community?
is a softball because I'm at the place, I mean, I've been to Hamlin State Prison, and you've got I talk about that all the time when I went up there a couple of years ago now. And between the Calvin College education program that you have, that's the same as the one in the the kids that aren't in prison yet. And then you've also got the vocation. What is it? I'm blanking on the name. I'm having one of my senior moments, but
I am too. It's vocational training at Hanlon and Ione, correct?
Yeah. And it's unbelievable because you've got these folks coming in. It's a medium maximum security prison, as I understand it, and they just all retooled it out here. And a bunch of people that I respect, like Mr. DeVos and others, have been a part of it, and Mike Gendano and others have really helped. And what they do is they basically get everyone skilled up. They have it's the same college curriculum that they have in the outside of the prison. And the individuals who are in prison take all the same classes, et cetera. They have better GPAs than the individuals who are in the main campus who aren't incarcerated. And so what happens is also, as I understand it, that for the individuals who complete their coursework, their children are guaranteed or have an ability to get scholarships to Calvin College. So you you think about it, breaking that chain, right? The whole idea of your dad's in prison, you never see him or this or that. I mean, now the fathers, they're doing the right thing. They're getting educated. And now they're trying to, their kids can get in and not into the prison, but to go to the school itself. And then the vocational village is unbelievable when they've got all these different folks coming in who are, came in and didn't have any skills. Now they're welders, they're electricians, you name it, across the board, everything. And what's happened is, I think it's the data I saw of it, and it's was 95% of the people coming out of prison were getting jobs from there, from the vocational village, and they weren't coming back, right? So that's what you want to see. And these are needed jobs in the country. You have people that were, they would change around there. Someone was going to work on the Tesla car, the first one, and this guy got out, and they were able to get him to Nevada where he needed to be. So I would say what you're doing up here is great. Heidi Washington is amazing, who's the head of corrections. And I know that she's had kind of some folks weren't happy what happened during COVID and all that. But I would say that program is amazing. And there's so many other groups, other organizations that do things after when people are out, but this is getting them ready to come back and be successful. And I really think every prison should do that. I mean, we've got people locked up, all these, just keeping them in a warehousing, or they could become worse over time. Let's make every prison one where people are learning, getting better, getting help. That's the whole idea behind the First Step Act and what they're doing, what you all are doing in Michigan as well. And then there are a lot of nonprofits that I could keep going on and on about that are really great out there, groups I work with. But I really am a big fan of what's happened at Hamlin State Prison, and I think that every prison should be doing it.
Well, it wasn't necessarily an intentional plug, but just to further give a Michigan data point, it's about 85% of Michigan's prisoners, so our state prisons, are going to return to our community. So the question is, how do we want them to return? Van, really going at overtime. I see you want to add to that.
I just want to, I can't add anything to what Holden just said, but I did just want to just give a little bit of coaching in terms of, I saw a couple of comments, how can we work together? The best thing I can say is when you're trying to work with somebody who's different, it's about learning how to cooperate without trying to convert. A lot of times we've gotten into the mindset, and I'll speak just for my progressive friends, that if you don't agree with me on everything, I can't work with you on anything. If you don't agree with me on every single thing, I can't work with you on anything at all. And so we wind up trying to convert people rather than just trying to cooperate with people. I've never seen a bird fly with only a left wing, not even in Berkeley, California. I've never seen it. I've never seen a bird fly with only a right wing, not even Mississippi. A bird takes two wings to fly. God made liberals and God made conservatives. God bless both sides. And when we work together, we get someplace. I'll say, agree to disagree, simple kindergarten rules. The conservatives care a lot about liberty, limited government, individual rights, individual dignity. Well, there's nothing more offensive of liberty and individual rights and individual dignity than what's going on in our prisons. Liberals care a lot about justice, making sure the little folks don't get run over by the big folks, making sure the Black and brown folks have a fair shot. Well, there's nothing more unjust than what's going on in our prisons. So you can have a liberty and justice for all coalition and get something done. And when it always happens, somebody on your side or somebody on the other side wants to raise some other stuff that you know is just going to get us fighting. Here's what you say. God bless you. I see it differently, but I think we're off topic. That's it. That is the magical formula. God bless you. I see it differently, but I think we're off topic. And then you go right back to what you were working on, because you've got all those people who need you to win, who don't have a vote, who can't tweet and can't march, and don't want the meeting to fall apart about some issue that might be important, but it's not important, more important to their freedom to them. So again, God bless you. I see it differently, but I think we're off topic. That will save you every time, and you can get something done. And we've proven it now in multiple states, including the great state of Michigan.
Thank you guys so much. To be clear, my comments about overtime, we're in overtime on your time. So thank you so very much for lending your time, your energy, and most importantly, your successfulness to not just us, but this greater cause. So thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you for your work.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. Take care.
Bye, everybody. Thank you. Love you, brother. Talk later, Holden.
See you.
So it's now time to turn to our panelists, who will bring a Michigan focus and a Southeast Michigan regional focus to this work here in Michigan. After brief introductions, we'll again hold a question and answer panel with our state panelists. So if you'd like to ask a question to the panel, please at any time utilize the chat at the bottom of your screen, and we'll be sure to get those questions asked so much as time will allow. So first up, I want to bring to the stage, if you will, from the Alliance for Safety and Justice, former State Representative Harvey Santana. Harvey is a former Democratic state representative from Detroit's 9th District and the government affairs manager for the Alliance for Safety and Justice. Welcome, Harvey. If I can give you the opportunity for the proverbial elevator pitch, can you tell us who is ASJ and what do you do?
Well, thank you, Jason. It's great to be here. Alliance for Safety and Justice is a nonprofit, national nonprofit that is dedicated towards criminal justice reform, and we also have the Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice, who is the largest crime survivors network in the United States. And we have a great team here, Jace, in the state of Michigan. We have Bill and Lori Wards, who I'm sure you all know, and of course you. And I should mention also that ASJ has already worked with a bipartisan team of legislators to pass significant justice reforms in Michigan, including objective parole, medical probation, medical parole, clean slate reforms. We also secured $4 million for essential services for domestic violence victims from the first federal stimulus package, and secured funds to create trauma recovery centers here in Michigan. Look, Mr. Speaker, despite massive spending on prisons, our communities are still unsafe. We know this. When I served in the Michigan legislature right after you left from term limits, I served as the minority vice chair of appropriations. I oversaw a $56 billion budget, of which $2 billion went directly towards managing 33,000 prisoners. Now, the questions we have to ask ourselves are simple. What is the return on investments when you know, and you said this earlier, that 85% of these men and women will re-enter society? And how do we want them to re-enter society? We believe Michigan, at ASJ, we believe Michigan has an opportunity to join other states by enacting productivity credits that incentivize people sentenced to prison to participate in rehabilitative programs and earn education. These incentives help to reduce recidivism and make reentry into society more successful. These programs are broadly supported by victims of crime across the state. As a matter of fact, we conducted a survey of thousands of crime survivors here in Michigan. What we discovered was that 8 in 10 crime survivors in Michigan support reducing prison sentences, and 3 out of 4 believe rehabilitation, drug, and mental health treatment are more effective at preventing future crimes. Today, the federal prison system and 35 other states provide programs like productivity credits. And to give you some quick statistics, Ohio reported a 50% drop in recidivism for people who participated in a college degree program during their sentence. Connecticut reported savings of $39.8 million annually through incentive programs. And Pennsylvania reported savings of $414 million a decade after creating its incentive program in 2008. So I think we have an opportunity here, Mr. Speaker.
Well, thank you, Harvey. Appreciate it. Next up, I want to bring forward Nina Hicks from the Center for Employment Opportunities. Nina is a seasoned professional with a combined 30 years of administration, leadership, education, and workforce development experience. Nina facilitates opportunities for formerly incarcerated individuals returning home to obtain employment and meet their goals of self-sufficiency and reduce the stigma and prejudices surrounding formerly incarcerated and or convicted individuals. Nina, what is the Center for Employment Opportunity and what do you do?
Hi, Harvey. I'm sorry, Harvey. I'm stuck on the last person. Hey, Jace. Thanks for having me here today. We greatly appreciate the opportunity. The Center for Employment Opportunity has one singular vision, and it is to really assist anyone with a criminal record who wants to work, provide them with the preparation and support needed to find a job and stay connected to the labor force. And so my role here in the state of Michigan, we are the only office here. Our CEO has expanded to like 30 cities across 11 states, but here in Michigan, our Detroit office is the only office in the state. And so my role has primarily been as not only as a director, but as an advocate and a facilitator of opportunity to help engage local employers in understanding the importance of inclusive hiring or second chance hiring. And I know Mr. Holden mentioned that quite a bit when he was speaking. But more importantly, to also work with our returning neighbors. Oftentimes you hear the term returning citizens, and yes, that's our politically correct term, but actually they're our returning neighbors. And so because they're going to live next door to us, they're going to be returning home to our neighborhood communities. And so we want to help connect those individuals that are returning home to opportunities through job readiness and through transitional employment, and that leads to permanent and full-time sustainable employment. And so that has been, my role. That is what CEO does. We offer individuals that are returning neighbors or returning citizens with immediate, effective, and comprehensive employment services exclusively for those individuals that are returning home from incarceration.
Thank you, Nina. That returning neighbors, that's a great point. I'm going to try to use that because it does illustrate very well. Next up, I'd like to introduce Melanca Clark from Michigan Justice Fund. Melanca is the president and CEO of Hudson Weber Foundation, a private foundation dedicated to improving quality of life in Detroit. She is also the founder and steering committee chair of a new multi-million-dollar funders collaborative, the Michigan Justice Fund, which seeks to advance effective and equitable justice policy in the state of Michigan. Prior to her role in philanthropy, Melanca served in the Obama administration, advancing the administration's efforts to increase fairness in the criminal and civil justice systems. And she recently served in the Biden transition team for the Department of Justice Agency Review Team. Melanca, tell us about your work.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me here. And it's wonderful to be part of this conversation. I thought I'd spend the time that I have here today just making sure folks knew about the Michigan Justice Fund. And as you just mentioned, I'm the steering committee chair of that fund. I'm also, of course, the president and CEO of Hudson Weber Foundation, which is a contributor to the Michigan Justice Fund, which is housed at the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan. So this is a first collaborative that came together. It's sort of been some time in the making. And we are just coming off a year of planning, which ended in December, where we really engaged the contributing funders and a cohort of practitioners and justice advocates in the state to co-create a grant-making plan and strategy for this fund. And so out of that process, we've got 3 goals. I'm going to list them. The first is strengthening Michigan funding policies and practices to support economic mobility and overall success of folks with a criminal record here in Michigan. The second is to reduce our reliance on confinement and adjudication. And the third is about building a movement for communities to shape justice policy in the state. And that's really, about supporting the leadership of folks that are impacted by the justice system. Also helping to create, and be a gathering place for a narrative change to really help bring many folks to the table. And I really have enjoyed the conversation today about how folks have been able to come together and achieve wins, obviously nationally and also here in Michigan. So just brass tacks about the fund. So we came off this planning year. We are now in our 3-year, multi-year phase of funding. We've got we have raised at this point close to $20 million. We've got 10 funders at our table. They are both funders that are here in Michigan, those like myself that are, city focused or regional. Then we've got statewide funders and national funders. So it's a really interesting mix of perspectives that are at our table. And it's really been wonderful to see folks that were interested from the funders' perspective in shared learning with practitioners. And for us as funders, and I'm just saying, the value to us, but we hope for the field too, that it allows us to really have a place to think about the ecosystem in our state, supporting the powerful advocates that we have, but for us as funders, where we might have been funding in isolation to particular grantees, we have a platform now to really think about the larger ecosystem and landscape and really co-create strategy to advance on the tremendous wins. Obviously, 2020 was a great year in Michigan for CJ reform. So we're just really excited about the work that we've done over this last year of pulling this together and the work to come.
Thank you, Melanca. Next up, I'd like to bring forward Aswad Thomas. Aswad is from the Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. He's the chief of organizing at Alliance for Safety and Justice and the national director of Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice, and a native of Michigan. Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice is a national network of 46,000 crime victims, including thousands of members and local chapters in Michigan. Aswad, you would think a crime survivor would want a lock them up and throw away the key approach. Why might that be wrong? Or from a perspective of a crime survivor, why does criminal justice reform matter?
Yeah, thank you, Jace, for having me, and thank you to everyone joining in. So as Jace mentioned, I am the National Director of Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice and the Chief of Organizing at the Alliance for Safety and Justice. So at CSSJ, we have 46,000 members, including thousands of members across the state of Michigan with local chapters, where we come together to share our stories, to heal together and advocate for a justice system that prioritizes healing, prevention, and recovery over more spending on incarceration. I come to this work as a victim of gun violence myself. I was shot twice in my back while leaving a local store in my neighborhood. And those bullets ended my basketball career in almost my life. And like many victims of crime from those communities that are most harmed by violence, the justice system didn't help me. I wasn't treated as a victim, and my need for services were ignored. So that's what really inspired me to get involved with Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice, to advocate for policies that keep me safe and policies that keep communities safe. As a crime victim, stopping the cycle of crime and passing reforms that have proven effective is what's most important to me. In order to do that, we need to ensure that our criminal justice system is effective at reforming behavior, and that the trauma that those impacted by crime that they face is addressed. And as Harvey mentioned earlier, a majority of crime victims across the state of Michigan believe in rehabilitation. They believe investing in mental health treatment, but also what they want is more services for crime victims, more services to help people deal with trauma, to help people deal with loss. And that's why, our crime survivor members across the state of Michigan, have been so essential to helping to secure funds for things like trauma recovery centers across the state, to make sure that all victims of violent crime receive support and help that they need. And also, we know that, from a direct experience of myself being a victim of gun violence, from losing my best friend in 1993 to a drive-by shooting when he was just 10 years old, we know that the voices of crime victims that look like me aren't at policy making tables. And so survivors of crime are not only advocating for things like trauma recovery centers, but we also are supporting criminal justice reform that both reduce crime and also provide support to services. We know that the people who are come in contact with the justice system, we know that if they are released and being able to access things like housing, employment, reentry services, those are the things that help stop the cycle of crimes. And that's why we as crime survivors across the state of Michigan supported a clean slate bill last year, and also why we are supporting productivity credits to ensure that people who are incarcerated get the rehabilitative support that they need to come home to be better neighbors in society.
Well, thank you, Aswad. I appreciate your joining us. All the panelists could join us now. And I'll remind our audience, again, we'll have the opportunity to ask your questions right now. So if you've got a question for the panel, please enter it in the chat and we'll seek to get to it if time allows. But your questions are always better than mine. So I'd rather ask your questions on your behalf. Let me start off with you, Harvey. Let me pitch you one first. And we talked earlier about our returning neighbors. And here in Michigan, as I said earlier, that's about 85% of our current prison population is going to return. So we've also mentioned earned time credits. What's the Alliance for Safety and Justice pushing this session? And why is now the right time to pursue these changes? But further, what support do you think is needed to advance your goals in the legislature, especially from the business community?
Okay, because I'm a former representative, work with you, I know how to answer multiple questions at once. So I'll start with the easy one first. What we're going to need from the business community is their support. We're going to need leaders to send a very strong message to lawmakers that this is good conservative public policy, and you won't lose credibility if you support these measures. The business community needs to convey the ripple effect these reforms will have throughout, Michigan's communities. Establishing incentives for people to participate in rehabilitation programs will lead to productive members of society. A reliable workforce that can support the local economy and reduce the chances that someone will return to prison.
And I know in Michigan, we've got history, there's truth in sentencing. There's, in some people's mind, it's the old good time. If I just sit in my cell and don't do anything wrong, then I get time off. You're talking about something different, aren't you?
We are. We're talking about individuals who will qualify for specific education opportunities while they're incarcerated, and we're holding them accountable for their crimes. They will be able to participate in like GED educational attainment, associates, bachelor's degrees, And whatever they do inside, there will be a formula that they can add up that will allow them to have some time off of their minimum sentence so they can appear before the parole board prior to being released for consideration.
So you don't earn time just by sitting there. You earn time by preparing for your return.
You listen, you got to work for it, you got to earn it, and you have to be invested.
All right. So Nina, now they're coming back. Our neighbor is returning. What policy reforms are needed to address the barriers to employment for those people coming home? And how is the West Michigan Policy Forum agenda connected?
Well, thank you for adopting that term. It's a more friendlier term, and I think again more humanizing, right? And so, for me, in terms of those reforms that are needed to address some of those barriers that returning neighbors are experiencing, is that I think we made a lot of progress in just passing some reforms that address some of the key barriers when they are coming home. You know, things like driver's license reform. You know, Van mentioned when he was talking some issues that around occupational licensing, and so there has been some movement in those areas. But you know, there's still room for growth and for upskilling the things that we do on the reentry side of it as well. And so, you know, just to start, you know, we really need to form strong partnerships between the state, between nonprofit communities. Those things are critical just to ensure that people have access to the services that they need when they return, particularly when it comes back to transitioning into the workforce. And so if we could get some state investments in this area, it would be really crucial to helping those nonprofit organizations or those of us that are in the reentry or workforce areas to, you know, provide greater services to the individuals that we serve. And so particularly if the program is evidence-based and the services are shown to improve people's outcomes, right? And so, you know, quality reentry services need to be there for people when they come home. We need to form more coalitions around and not make it, I think Van mentioned that, he said to be able to cooperate and not convert. And so, you know, our belief is always that we work better together. If, you know, my wheelhouse is job readiness and employment and training, someone else's wheelhouse may be housing. And so that is an opportunity for both of us to partner together, because we know stable housing for returning neighbors is important. And so, you know, it's kind of like that Maslow's hierarchy that, you know, I can't get to employment if I don't have somewhere secure to live. I can't get to employment if I don't have transportation. And so we end up kind of like a gerbil on a wheel. But if we can begin to really form those supportive reentry services and not feel like we're competing with one another, I think it would, you know, be a much better opportunity for those individuals that we're serving.
Thank you, Nina. Can you, any employers that you can highlight or experiences you can share, like share with those who are hiring reentering citizens or returning neighbors?
Oh, absolutely. Because we work both with private sector and public sector employers. And so some of the employers that we work that are right here in my immediate community, we're located here in Midtown Detroit. And so right down the street from me, a stone's throw away, is Henry Ford Health Systems. And so we have partnered with Henry Ford Health Systems to provide opportunities for our program participants in various fields in their within the organization. And so, you know, they give them the opportunity to interview. We have individuals that are placed there now in various positions. And so that partnership has been strong. We also partner with the city of Detroit, who has completely banned the box. And so we work quite closely with them. As a matter of fact, the mayor's Deputy Mayor's Assistant, Dr. Tara Defoe, is a part of our advisory committee here at the Center for Employment Opportunities. And so She works directly with she has a returning citizens task force or returning neighbors task force. And so we work to find opportunities through the city where we can have placement. We're doing a major project through the Detroit Employment Solutions Corporation right now. It's a $350,000 project for refurbishing in the Fitzgerald neighborhood and community. And so our participants are working, through the city and through DESC to provide services in that residential area as well. So we are that employment piece and attachment to immediate employment is one of the barriers that we help remove that we know helps reduce recidivism.
Well, thank you. And it's great to hear so many success stories.
Thank you.
Melanca, to you, why is the philanthropic community in Michigan embracing these issues?
Great question. So I think, there are just tracking that conversation about different things, bring different people together around these issues. I would say there is, for many funders, if you look at sort of the priorities that they have had, enduring priorities, it's often around opportunity. And I think that even before the national conversation that was occasioned by George Floyd's death last summer, I think there was an increasing recognition that if you care about opportunity, you have to think about the flip side. What are the structural barriers to opportunity, and how can we take that on from a systems level? And so certainly when we started this conversation, that was where folks were at. We're really wanting to think about how could funders be in this space together and being thoughtful about systems change. I think with the national conversation, again, that that underscored the racial inequity in our system, and COVID, of course, did that as well. I think we had a whole new set of funders that may not have thought about these issues in quite the same way, but because they were magnified, they were also really interested in being at this table that we're setting.
Great. Thank you for your work.
Sure.
Aswad, we kind of touched on it before, but can you help unpack why would a crime survivor support re-entry initiatives and or earned credits and or any of these other criminal justice reforms that you'd want to highlight?
That's a great question, Jace, and it's different from what we've heard, for decades, right? As a crime victim, what I want more and what crime victims want more than anything is for what happened to us to not to happen to anyone else. And so supporting rehabilitation, reporting things like earned credit, and efforts to reduce recidivism will improve the safety and well-being of crime victims and communities. If we are to reduce crime, we need to incentivize those programs that reduce recidivism and make prisons safer. And we also need to make reentry into society more successful, as Nina is talking about. In addition to that, we also need to expand eligibility to the state's victims compensation program so that all crime victims get the help that they need without all of the red tape. We also know that in the crime victims compensation program, victims have to file a police report, within days of becoming a victim of crime. It's 48 hours that you must file a police report in order to be eligible for the program. And you only have, up to a year to apply for the program. So we need to extend those time limits to help crime victims get the support and help that they need. We know that crime and violence is increasing across the state of Michigan as it is across the country. We also know we need to, increase, the benefits that survivors are able to receive to help cover the cost of funeral expenses and things like lost wages. And finally, we need to ensure that safe and stable housing and employment protections are for all crime survivors. And those are the things that make communities safe. And we are continuing to be so excited, to continue our partnership with the West Michigan Policy Forum and other organizations to help improve probation in Michigan, to help ensure that all crime victims get access to support and services that they need. Those are the things that keep communities safe across the state of Michigan. Those are the things that crime victims are advocating for in this year's legislative session.
Thank you, Aswad. And I think it was you that mentioned earlier, Trauma Recovery Center. Can you help explain those unfamiliar with what a TRC or Trauma Recovery Center is?
Yes, so the Trauma Recovery Center is an amazing program that was founded in California a few years ago. Now we have 35 trauma recovery centers across the country, including working hard to get trauma recovery centers in Michigan, states like Detroit, Flint, Battle Creek, Grand Rapids, also in rural communities as well. So a trauma recovery center model is a community-based one-stop shop for all victims of violent crime. The model works in partnership with hospitals, community-based organizations, law enforcement, the prosecutors and DA's office to ensure that crime victims get the help and support that they need, including counseling and therapy. Many victims don't know how to navigate the criminal justice system, so ensuring that crime victims have someone to help them navigate the justice system, helping connect them victims to work, helping to fill out that long victims compensation application that you must complete when you are recovering from a crime. You have to get your W-2s, you have to get your lost wages, you have to get any receipts that helps cover the offset of crime. So the trauma recovery model is a one-stop shop in the community for all victims of violent crime to walk in the door, knock on the door, say, I am a victim of a crime and I need help. And the center will provide services in their facility, or what's exciting about the TRC model that it also does assertive outreach. So staff are trained to go meet the survivors where they are at in their community, whether it's in their home or at a local shelter or at homeless encampments. The TRC was designed to reach the most marginalized crime victims. And we're excited to be working in this legislation to get TRCs to trauma recovery centers, because if I had a trauma recovery center when I became a victim of violence, my recovery would have been a lot faster. When I lost my best friend to gun violence at 10 years old in 1993, if our community had a trauma recovery center, his family would have got the support that they need. And those are the things that helps to stop the cycles of crime in Michigan. So we're excited to be advocating for TRCs in addition to criminal justice reforms.
Again, thank you for your work. Really appreciate it. Nina, I see that you got Dawn's question answered. I appreciate that in the chat. So let me close with you, Melanca. We've probably got time we're in another set of overtime, but this always happens. We could do this conversation for way longer than time will allow. But Melanca, let me give you the last shot. How does the Michigan Justice Fund envision partnering with Michigan stakeholders in this important work?
Sure. So I'll start with the obvious, and as folks think about this fund coming online, clearly we're in the business of giving grants, and we're really excited about providing support and capacity for the many advocates and practitioners in the state that are doing this important work. It's worth noting, while last year was the planning phase, we actually did do a limited amount of grant making. And now that we are in the multi-year phase, we're soon to announce the first round of grants that are about supporting innovation in direct services, which is support for pilots, but also support for evaluation of promising practices and the like, because we certainly want to see those practices proliferate across the state. But a large part of the work will actually be capacity building for our policy advocates. So that's the grant making, but it's important to note that we do think that this is a place and space that will help advance the field, not just with particular dollars for grants, but by holding tables. Over the last year, we held a learning cohort, and expect to do that again, a place to gather for shared learning for folks around particular topics and issues. And that's an important place. I mean, I think one thing that we're mindful of, particularly with we're so appreciative of all our funders, but because we have so many local funders here in Michigan with their networks and community foundations like out of Grand Rapids, just thinking about the policy forums footprint. We're excited for the tables that we're already at to ensure that this population and folks that work on behalf of this population are at those tables with us as we talk with, we're not certainly as funders advocating for particular legislative bills and the like, but certainly as we talk to the executive branch, as we talk to our local public sector leaders, as we think about partnerships, really leveraging those places and spaces that funders are just already in.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Melanca. Thank you to all of our panel. We appreciate your time, your work, and your partnership. We at the West Michigan Policy Forum look forward to continuing to work with you for crime victims, for our returning neighbors, and for healthy communities. So I'd like to turn it back to Doug DeVos to close us out today, and I appreciate all of your work.
All right, thanks, Jason. Again, our thanks, Harvey, and to Aswad, Nina, Melanca. Great discussion, and thanks for your work. And I know, Aswad, as you were going through some of the things about this part of the system, and you got the victims have to do this and have to do that, and all I can think of is Van's reminder for us on the anti-stupid portion of things. I mean, it's just. It's always fascinating how we get ourselves into these things. Where did that rule come from? How did we create this barrier? And I know we do it in business too. It's not just in the public area. We do silly things in our businesses sometimes, and so it just requires us to keep thinking and innovating and trying to be better as we go forward. So I just am grateful for this opportunity. We're so thankful, I think, for Mark and for Van and their participation as well. I think this is a great opportunity, and we really appreciate what the West Michigan Policy Forum is doing, has done. And so to the Chamber for organizing the event, great stuff. Now, for all of us who are participating, you always come for this, now what do we do? Well, we have to keep these issues alive. Use them in conversation with your friends, with your colleagues. Use what you've learned. Talk about the 2 or 3 things that you pulled away from that really hit you, whatever it was. Make sure you talk with your colleagues about that. Raise the issue, expand the issue, have a conversation. And you don't need to convert anybody, like was said earlier. Just figure out how to cooperate, collaborate, raise the issue, make people aware. These are our neighbors, our families, our community members. And I thought Van articulated so powerfully. These are people without power. And if we don't speak for them, and if we don't look at this issue, then who will? Because they're not in a position to do it themselves. And so you see here on this call, so many people who are taking up that call and that challenge and make it their work, their life's work, their passion to go forward. And we need to find a way in the business community to make sure we get close to that as well. Of course, if you know a legislator or you have any contacts there, make sure that this work gets that attention, that we continue to move forward. Stay in touch with us at the West Michigan Policy Forum or our friends who are participated on the call here to continue to support the work there. So I hope that this is informative. I hope it inspires you and gets you to connect with the element of the passion of why this work is important and how it can make our communities better and overcome these sorts of challenges. And the spirit of partnership is really something that we can use to build on. I trust that this event was helpful to make that happen. And certainly with that, Kylee, and for you and the whole team at the Ballmer Group, we're just grateful for your commitment to Michigan. As you said, last time we were together was, I don't think Steve and Connie have had a chance to be back since then. I don't think any of us have had a chance to be anywhere since then except home for the most part. So we're grateful for the commitment to Michigan and what you're doing and how you are bringing people together as well. So it's been a great time. We're going to give you a little time this afternoon to wrap things up. Thanks for coming. To all the people who have participated, thank you for your participation. I think we're just a touch ahead of the 5 o'clock time frame that we had promised. So have a great afternoon. And remember this content, and I hope it is helpful for you as you go throughout the rest of this day and in the days and weeks and months ahead. Thanks, everybody. Have a great afternoon, and appreciate your time.